It's 7:30 in the evening across India. I'm Amritpal Singh. Live from New Delhi, you're watching DDI Global, bringing you the day's big stories from across India and the world. My colleague Nick Harper is joining me from Washington, D.C. Nick, good to see you. How are you?
Good morning, Amrit. It's 9 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. It's 3 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, more on the historic US-Russia prisoner swap. We'll be live with our global correspondents. And unrest continues in Venezuela as Western nations accuse President Nicolas Maduro of vote rigging. But first, the headlines.
Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh buried near Doha in Qatar. Hezbollah continues to fire dozens of rockets towards Israel. Fears of a wider regional conflict deepen. US President Biden says killing of Hamas political chief Haniyeh has not been helpful for ceasefire after speaking with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
And friendship. Multiple countries helped get this done. They joined a difficult, complex negotiations at my request. And I personally thank them all again. And I've thanked them personally, and I'll thank them again.
Emotional scenes, hugs and tears as journalist Evan Gershkovich reunited with family in the US. Putin receives freed Russians in Moscow. Over 300 dead after landslides wreak havoc in India's Wayanad. Cloudbursts in Himachal Pradesh in northern India. Rescue operation underway to trace 45 missing people. The West, including the United States and Russia, completed a 24-person prisoner swap on Thursday, the largest in post-Soviet history. With Moscow releasing journalist Evan Gershkovich and fellow American Paul Whelan, along with dissidents including Vladimir Kara-Murza in a multinational deal that set 24 people free. The West, including the US, released 16 Russian nationals, while Russia released 8 people. Russian President Vladimir Putin met with the prisoners returning to Russia on their arrival in Moscow, saying they would be given state awards. The exchange also represents a victory for Putin. And Germany, which played a key role in the negotiations, said that the exchange of prisoners were done after careful consideration, adding that prisoners' lives were the most important in the swap decision.
I'm happy to do that. That was a very difficult decision. It is a weighing up of various interests. From our point of view, the good of freedom and the lives of prisoners in Russia, in Belarus, were more important than these 15 people should have a free life, a good prospect for their future. Weighing up the fact that you release someone who has been sentenced to murder.
And DD India's Dasha Chernishova joins us for more from Moscow. Dasha, Joe Biden has called the prisoner swap a feat of diplomacy and friendship. How does Russia look at it?
Well, Russia is very clearly saying that it was the President Vladimir Putin's tough stance on the swap rather than the extradition of the convicted Americans that helped to yield the desired results. It is seen indeed as the big achievement for the channels of communications that do still remain between Moscow and Washington, and the Kremlin has confirmed that there have been very elaborate channels established between FSB, Russian Federal Security Service, as well as the American CIA that helped to provide for the results that we have just seen with this paramount swap of prisoners. Moscow is also saying that the details about the internal work that has been undergoing should remain secret because the work is ongoing. There are still prisoners who are on the list to be swapped in future, and Moscow is working on this process as well. At the same time, Kremlin has also said that the people who are returning to Russia, they will be given the state awards. They have been met by the Russian president at the Vnukovo airport last night, with the Russian president telling them welcome back home, and he was also speaking in Spanish to two of the miners who traveled on board of Rossiya plane that traveled from Ankara to Moscow, because the Kremlin has confirmed those two miners didn't know that they were Russians until the very moment that plane has actually taken off in Ankara. They didn't know that they were Russians, and they didn't know where they were going to. Their parents were accused of espionage in Slovenia. So the understanding now is obviously that the work on the further prisoner swaps will be ongoing, but also that the fate of these 10 people that are coming back home will have to be established. We have seen previously some of the cases when the prisoners who were kept in NATO countries were returning back to Russia, and they were taking high-ranking positions within the Russian government. For instance, Viktor Bur, who is now exercising in the Russian legislative bodies, as well as Maria Butina, who is also the Russian lawmaker. So in Russia it is seen indeed as an achievement, but at the same time the Kremlin is willing to make it clear that the negotiations with the United States, for instance, on Ukraine, will have to be conducted on a completely different basis, not through the channels that were involved into this prisoner swap. But at the same time, Moscow is sending a very strong signal that negotiations are possible, and the swap, the largest in history, is another proof of that.
Dasha Chernishova, many thanks for giving us that update. And the prisoner swap is being touted as the biggest Russia-West prisoner exchange since Cold War. Nick Harper is in Washington, D.C. for more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. So, Nick, has Joe Biden burnished his credentials as what he calls a feat of diplomacy and friendship?
Well, it certainly seems to be a big win for the US president. Late last night, just outside of Washington, D.C., Joe Biden, along with Vice President Kamala Harris, greeted the 3 American nationals released by Russia in this historic prisoner swap deal. The White House said it negotiated the trade with Russia, Germany and 3 other countries in secrecy for more than a year. US President Joe Biden hailed the deal a feat of diplomacy and friendship.
The deal that made this possible was a feat of diplomacy and friendship. Friendship. Multiple countries helped get this done. They joined in difficult, complex negotiations at my request, and I personally thank them all again. And I've thanked them personally, and I'll thank them again.
Well, to get more on all this, DD India's Mitch McCann joins us live from New York. Mitch, how did the families of the freed prisoners react when they got off the plane here in the United States?
Well, Nick, it was certainly a moment of overwhelming joy for those families and those freed prisoners who had finally arrived back in the United States at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland just before midnight last night when Evan Gershkovich, Paul Whelan and Alsu Kumasheva got off that plane. Now, perhaps one of the most poignant moments with their families was when Evan Gershkovich hugged his mum, who he hadn't seen in well over a year, and swept her up into the air, really illustrating how happy he was to be home and to see his family again. Now, this prisoner swap, as you mentioned, Nick, is significant for a number of reasons. It is being called the largest prisoner swap since the Cold War. And Joe Biden, the US president, has really hailed this as a huge feat of diplomacy. He said this is a feat of diplomacy and friendship. He added, it matters if other leaders trust you and you trust them, you get things done. And the reason Joe Biden is referring to other leaders is because this was a multi-country agreement to free 24 people. It involved the United States, Germany, Poland, Slovenia, Norway and Russia. And since landing back in the country last night, we have heard from some of these people, including Evan Gershkovich, who spoke to one of the reporters at Joint Base. advocating for other political prisoners. Here's what he had to say. He said, "There's one thing I would like to say. It was great to get on that bus today and see not just Americans and Germans, but Russian political prisoners." He added, "I just spent a month in prison at Yekaterinburg, where basically everyone I sat with was a political prisoner." So those are some early comments from Ivan Gershkovich after he arrived back in the United States last night. Now, just finally, those freed people, Kumasheva, Whelan and Gershkovich, have arrived in San Antonio, Texas, Nick, at the Brooke Army Medical Center, where they're going to be receiving post-isolation support. This is a military program where they are taught or assisted in reintegrating back into normal life again after, in many cases, a very long time away in Russia.
Mitch, thank you. A very big moment. Mitch McCann joining us live from New York City. Well, next today, former US President Donald Trump says that he raised just over $138 million in July, increasing the total cash that he has on hand to $327 million at the end of the month. Trump's total represents a jump from June, when the former president's campaign and aligned committees reported bringing in nearly $112 million. The assassination attempt against Trump on July the 13th at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, was expected to spur campaign contributions. In contrast, US Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign announced on Friday that it raised $310 million in July. Harris's fund is double the amount of money raised by former President Donald Trump during the month. Well, as the political unrest in Venezuela continues over the election result, more leaders have called on the country to release detailed voting tallies. The presidents of Brazil, Mexico and Colombia called on Venezuela to release the tally details on Thursday, as the dispute over presidential election results sparked protests. Those presidents have adopted a more neutral stance on the election, as countries around the world call for the release of the full tallies.
Esta tarde los presidentes de Colombia,
Presidents of Colombia, Brazil and Mexico, along with their foreign ministers, discussed the past presidential elections in Venezuela. The leaders got together to keep on working on options that give the international accompaniment the Venezuelan people need right now, always respecting their sovereignty, and that allows for a definitive solution for the current controversies. Colombian President Gustavo Petro also talked with the Chilean President Gabriel Boric, who agreed on what Colombia, Brazil and Mexico said in their statement. From Colombia, we'll stay attentive and ready to offer our good services in favor of political peace and democracy in the region.
Meanwhile, the United States on Thursday announced that it was not recognizing the election result and was instead recognizing opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez as the winner of Venezuela's presidential election. US President Joe Biden has spoken to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to again reaffirm his commitment to Israel's security against all threats. The White House on Thursday said that the leaders discussed new US military deployments to support Israel against threats such as missiles and drones.
I'm very concerned about it. I had a very direct meeting with the Prime Minister today. Very direct. We have the basis for a ceasefire. He should move on it, and they should move on it now.
Meanwhile, responding to a question on the death of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh, Biden said that his assassination has not helped the ceasefire talks. And more on that. Top Qatari leaders, including Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani, attended the funeral ceremony of Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh near Doha. Haniyeh was assassinated in the Iranian capital of Tehran earlier this week, raising fears of a wider regional escalation. All of that as the terror group Hezbollah fired dozens of rockets towards Israeli territory in the late hours of Thursday. A top Hezbollah commander was killed in an Israeli airstrike in the Lebanese capital earlier this week, days after Israel accused Hezbollah of attacking the Golan Heights. The Israeli Defense Force said there was no damage or casualties. It also said that only 5 of the rockets were able to enter Israel and the rest were intercepted. In response, the Israeli forces struck a Hezbollah rocket launcher in southern Lebanon's Yatta, which was being used to fire the barrage at the western Galilee region. Well, that's it from me here in Washington. I'm handing it back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Nick, for that. And meanwhile, India has issued an advisory for Indian nationals in Israel. Indian Embassy has strongly advised Indian nationals to stay vigilant and adhere to safety protocols. It has also released emergency helpline numbers that are visible on your screens right now. That the Indians can call the Indian Embassy in Tel Aviv in case of any issues. Earlier, Air India said that it's suspending its flights to and from Tel Aviv with immediate effect up to August 8. And still to come on DD India Global, at least 3 protesters killed in Nigeria as demonstrators rally against rising costs of living and governance issues. Police on red alert. Germany joins US-led command policing the South-North Korea border.
This summer, the world turns its eyes to Paris, and DD India brings you every heartbeat, every victory, and every story. Introducing our special coverage of the Paris Olympics. Experience the passion, the drama, and the triumphs. With exclusive reports, expert analysis, and up-to-the-minute updates. Join us as we bring the spirit of the Olympics to your screens.
Get ready for the ultimate sporting extravaganza on DD India.
DD India presents Champions Day Paris. Only on DD India. Every day at 6:30 p.m. IST, 1 p.m. GMT.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I'm Amritpal Singh. Germany officially joined the US-led United Nations Command in South Korea on Friday, joining a group of nations that police the border separating South Korea from North. The force will defend the South's border in the event of a conflict with the North. Germany is the 18th country to join the command and the first since Italy was reinstated in 2013. Germany's Defense Minister Boris Pistorius said that the move is a clear sign of Berlin's commitment to peace and security in the Indo-Pacific. The recent protests in Nigeria have claimed 3 lives, with police mobilized all over the country in case of any untoward incident. The military has also been put on alert to support the police if and when needed. Kano State has imposed a 24-hour curfew, while 3 other states in Nigeria imposed curfews in some areas. Nigerians have been protesting against policy reforms and governance of President Bola Tinubu.
The northern states of Borno, Kano and Yobe declared a 24-hour curfew to prevent the escalation of violence. Incidents of violence were reported in the northern part of the country, where public infrastructure was vandalized and looted, while vehicles were set ablaze. Police fired several rounds of tear gas in many parts of the country, including the capital Abuja, to disperse protesting crowds. Protesters expressed their anger and frustration over the poor state of the economy, carrying placards with inscriptions like "End Bad Governance" and "Enough is Enough" to hunger and hardship. The government had pushed for the protests to be cancelled, but Nigerians insisted on holding the demonstrations, saying reforms introduced by President Bola Tinubu have led to economic hardship. The government's removal of a subsidy in May last year has led to a sharp rise in fuel prices, which in turn has caused an increase in transportation costs, food prices and overall inflation. The protests are the first big demonstrations by Nigerians since the End SARS movement against police brutality in 2020. The rallies are expected to last for 10 days as Nigerians demand accountability, the reinstatement of petrol subsidy, among other political issues. Nigeria's government has appealed for more time to address economic challenges, adding that it does not want the protests to reverse the progress it says it has made in the last year. Ajak Mangut in Abuja, reporting for DD India.
India's President Draupadi Murmu inaugurated the two-day Conference of Governors at the Rashtrapati Bhavan in New Delhi on Friday. In her opening remarks at the conference, the President said that the agenda for the conference included issues that are crucial in achieving national goals. She further added that the deliberations of this conference would be an enriching experience for the participants and help them in their functioning. Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah also addressed the conference. Prime Minister Modi and other leaders urged the governors to strengthen centre-state coordination and promote social welfare. India is hosting the 32nd edition of the International Conference of Agricultural Economists. Prime Minister Modi will open the conference and address the gathering on Saturday in New Delhi. The conference will explore issues and solutions in the domain of sustainable agri-systems. DD India correspondent Shubhendu Ghosh reports.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi will inaugurate the 32nd International Conference of Agricultural Economists on Saturday. Theme for the conference is Transformation towards Sustainable Agri-Food Systems. It will showcase India's agricultural progress, including advancements in digital agriculture and sustainable agri-food systems.
The theme of this conference reflects that first a major change in the approach of agriculture economic research is that from individual component it will move towards system approach, which is a holistic approach.
The conference will highlight India's proactive approach to global agricultural challenges and showcase the nation's advancements in agriculture, research and policy.
This conference will go a long way in building up the network between the young researchers and the senior researchers from across the world and help us in capacity development and providing evidence-based research for sustainable agriculture development in the country.
The triennial conference, organized by the International Association of Agricultural Economists, is taking place from 2nd to 7th of August. The ICAE is being held in India after 65 years. The conference is witnessing participation of around 1,000 delegates from around 75 countries. In the face of growing climate change, natural disasters and human conflicts, the International Conference of Agricultural Economists will discuss the way forward for sustainable agri-food system. They will also focus on India's role and expertise in the domain. With camera person Shubhendu Ghosh for DD India in Delhi.
Indian Navy's frontline frigate INS Tabar arrived in St. Petersburg in Russia on a 4-day visit to participate in the 328th Russian Navy Day parade celebrations. The visit by INS Tabar aims to strengthen the long-standing friendship and also explore newer avenues of bolstering the relationship between India and Russia. INS Tabar successfully conducted the maritime partnership exercise with the Russian Navy ship on the 30th of July. Relief and rescue operations are being carried out on a massive scale in the southern Indian state of Kerala. A C-130J Super Hercules aircraft of the Indian Air Force with a specialized drone and a team were sent to Kozhikode. This drone will further be sent to Wayanad to assist in the rescue operations. The official records put the death toll at more than 300. Rescue teams are working tirelessly under challenging conditions to look for survivors. India's weather agency has predicted heavy downpour in Wayanad and several other districts in the state in the coming week. The Indian Meteorological Department issued a red alert on extremely heavy rains in parts of Uttarakhand as overnight rains triggered flooding in the Indian state of Uttarakhand. the north Indian state of Uttarakhand. The centre has dispatched 2 Indian Air Force helicopters, one's a Chinook and the other Mi-17, to aid rescue operations in the state. The Kedarnath Yatra was also suspended. On the other hand, rescue operations are underway in the northern state of Himachal Pradesh to trace more than 48 people missing following flash floods triggered by cloudbursts in 3 districts. In Bangladesh, thousands of hundreds of students under the anti-discrimination student movement took to roads and streets in different parts of the country on Friday. Clashes were reported between the police and protesters, with police, the Rapid Action Battalion and the Border Guard Bangladesh deployed in various parts of the country. Let's now take a look at some other stories making news around the world. The Thai Department of Fisheries has formally requested biological samples and DNA from Ghana to investigate the origins of an invasive black-chin tilapia species that has spread rapidly across Thailand. A private sector entity from Ghana had originally sought permission to import the fish species for research purposes in 2010. Over the past 20 years, German expert group led by Andrea Toy-Affel has been carrying out many other restoration projects at the Hui heritage sites across Vietnam to preserve native heritage and culture of Vietnam. And now for all the updates from the Paris Olympics. India defeated Australia 3-2 for the first time in 52 years in final men's hockey Pool B match of the Paris Olympics on Friday. For India, Abhishek and Harmanpreet Singh scored while Thomas Craig and Blake Govers scored for Australia. A win has helped the side finish second in Pool B. Australia have 9 points from 4 games. Earlier, the Indian hockey team suffered its first loss of the edition, going down 1-2 to defending champions Belgium. And that's it then in this edition of DD India Live. But do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Amritpal Singh, and for my entire team in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Global.